What I would like to do this morning is to run through a very short agenda, short, sharp and shiny, where we're going to cover just a couple of topics. Most of you here today are customers of our products in some way, with our Amplify or our Principal Toolbox products. And we want to talk about what's new, what's changed, what's happened in 2015 and the plans for 2016. I thought that as well as talking about software, which obviously I'm happy to talk about software all day, I thought I might also entice you along by providing a case study from one of our customers, Peter from the Sydney Local Health District. So just to break up listening to me, I'm going to invite Peter up shortly to talk as well. So the agenda for today is we'll start by having a talk about about Amplify. We'll then hear from Peter, and then we'll talk about Principal Toolbox. At the end of the session, I have set aside a few more minutes for some coffee and catch up if you want to talk to Peter or myself. But I also appreciate that I'm sure you've got a full day, as we all do, to get on to afterwards. So what I wanted to start with is just a quick chat, because sometimes people ask me, so why do you have two products? Why do you sell Principal Toolbox and Amplify? Do they do the same thing? And are they competing? Why would you have two? And so I thought I'd just quickly talk about the life cycle that we're looking to support. So obviously the area I come from, and I know that a lot of you come from, is the delivery space. We're out there delivering programs and projects. And those decisions about which programs and projects which are to be run have been taken through a combination of portfolio management. Yes, we have a list of things we'd like to do, but also they've probably come from some strategic planning activities that have occurred. Now, traditional project delivery systems like Principal Toolbox, like Microsoft Project, like Clarity, are very good at this part. And they support project managers to manage schedules, to manage risks and issues and budgets, and to provide status reports and to roll those status reports up into programs and portfolio status reports. What they generally don't provide a very good link to is back to the business. How do we take the outputs of our projects and programs and show that those outputs are going to deliver business value? And so over the last few years, I've been scratching my head about exactly how that would work, and the result of my scratching is our Amplify product. Okay, so what we have is, we usually have a different audience here. The audience that is deciding what our organisation needs, what it should look like in 3 years' time, what it should look like in 5 years' time, generally are the ones who then decide which projects and programs are going to be funded. And once the projects and programs deliver, then it's not up to, and this is where I often say to project managers, good news, I think you're off the hook. You should not be responsible for benefits management. I often hear people say that project managers are responsible for all these things and benefits. And I say, well, how can they be responsible for benefits? They're not able to go into the business and affect change. Right? They don't have the authority to do so. They're able to advise on change. They obviously need to be aware that change needs to happen, but the change must be taken by the business and led by the business. And so we have two audiences for our information. And so the Amplify audience, obviously there are some crossovers, but there is an Amplify audience and a Principal Toolbox audience. So we focus here on strategic execution, and here we're focusing on delivering, program and project delivery. Okay, and we have the products to suit. And I just wanted to point out, this is an interesting discussion that often happens, which is benefits realisation. That's something that happens after project and program management occurs. Once we've delivered, then we think about benefits. And so I thought, since we're in Sydney today, I added this slide in. This is a slide where I've just taken a few points from the New South Wales Government Benefits Realisation Management Framework, which, for those who don't know, is available on the New South Wales Department of Finance Services and Innovation website. And it's a really good piece of collateral. I know that some of you who are here today actually help contribute to this document. And the reason I've put this up is just to point out that even here, a benefits realisation management framework, which contains, the first document is principles, and the first 3 principles in that framework are that benefits management starts by defining programs and project objectives and the benefits they deliver. So we've got to be thinking about the benefits we want before we even define the projects and programs, not after. Benefits are not there to justify the investment, they are the reason for making the investment in the first place. Okay? Benefits identification drives refinements to the business case. So when we're building the business case, we're not looking to find enough benefits to justify the cost. Actually, we were just, my business partner Tony and I were talking last night. He's just come from Canberra, where one of our, unfortunately, very large spending government agencies was saying they have exactly this problem. We know what we want to invest in, we just can't find enough benefits to justify it. Oh dear. So this type of work needs to happen, and it needs to be aligned with the strategic goals of the organisation. It needs to happen up front before we get into program and project delivery. Okay? So that's why it tops and tails the work that we do in delivering projects and programs. So what does Amplify do? Well, it does 3 things. Plan, execute and implement strategy. Encourage stakeholder engagement in creating accurate, defined, validated business cases. And then, once we actually have a baseline of what we're trying to deliver in terms of value to our business, then we have some tools to help us to track. So many people I speak to think that benefits management is about tracking. Well, what are you tracking? And what are you tracking against? So there's a lot of activity. Most of the activity actually happens beforehand. And if it's set up correctly, then delivery will just happen. So let's just have a little talk about Amplify Release 9. So what we've done over the last 12 months is we've put a big focus into, we have a 4-step process, and all benefits frameworks are based on a similar process of identifying, planning, then realising and evaluating the value that we've delivered. What we've done is spent a lot of time now working on the planning stages. So making sure that when we actually build a business case, that the business case is in a position that will allow us to do measurement once we've moved into program delivery. And so some of those features that have made it into the current release are the ability to create not just a single option, but to come up with multiple options. So in our experience, we were finding that when we have a program of work, there may be more than one way to achieve the outcome. We might be able to build versus buy. We might insource or we might outsource. There are a whole range of different options, and we want to be able to compare those both in terms of cost and in terms of value and risk. And so we thought about, well, how would this work in Amplify? Our existing customers who we were working with, the way that we were doing it was that we would just create different initiatives. And that works, it's okay. We could have an initiative which was to build and another one to buy. But then the process of comparing those options was quite difficult, particularly where a lot of the information that would go into business case A and business case B were the same. There were a lot that was similar, and there were some parts that were different. So we thought, well, how would we build a system to support that? And so what we've done is we've provided some new features, and they actually flow into each other. And I'm just going to give you a really quick demonstration of those things. They always say, don't give live, I always say to myself, don't give live software demos unless you absolutely have to, but I'm going to try one now. So let's see how we get on. Okay, so for those who are familiar with Amplify, here we have the Amplify benefit map. So let's just imagine that what we have is a piece of work here. This is a program where we're investigating building some new hospital facilities. And we have some objectives of our program, which are to improve health outcomes for our citizens and also to improve efficiency in hospital care. So they're the outcomes, and we're thinking that maybe one way to do that is to build some new facilities. So we've gone through the process of engaging with stakeholders, and we've built a benefit map all the way from building the hospital through to how we transition to the new hospital and achieve and measure and achieve the benefits. Let's perhaps consider that while we were going through this workshop activity to build the map, someone says, well, look, I don't think we need the expense and the risk of building a new hospital. Why don't we just upgrade the existing facilities? Now, in Amplify 8, we would have created a new initiative for that and built its own business case. Now in Amplify 9, we have the ability within the map to very quickly be able to create new maps. So we can create another option. Okay? And that other option, say upgrading existing facilities, we can then work with our stakeholders and come up with its map. And that map will have its own set of projects, it will have its own outcomes, its own business change, and its own benefits. But they all link back to a common set of objectives. So that way we can still confirm that option A and option B, well perhaps they do together, both of them are viable alternatives. So once we've created these options, we can actually create more than one option. We might create a whole range of options. For example, we might decide that perhaps we need to not only build some new facilities, but upgrade some IT infrastructure as well. So we might go ahead and create a map for that. And so upgrading the IT infrastructure might just improve efficiency of healthcare. So now what we're doing is by engaging with different sets of stakeholders and coming up with different options, we're exploring all the possible alternatives for achieving the same set of business objectives. Once we've done that, what we can do is then consider and compare the options. So we now have an options comparison feature, and what this allows us to do is we might have, for example, an option which is the build new facilities option. And so we're going to, that option has 4 benefits for a total return of 138 million, and we also are going to improve the efficiency of hospital care. But what we can see is very quickly that this, in terms of financial returns, it has a very poor NPV. In fact, it's a negative return. Maybe there's a better option. So maybe we come up with an idea where we're going to refurbish the existing facilities. So I can then select all the components that I need to build my option, and I can then see, well actually this one is going to provide a positive return. The minister's probably happier to sign off on this. It's a positive return to the state, and it has the non-financial benefits of improving health outcomes as well. Now perhaps what I need to do then is not just provide a single option. What I'd like to do is provide and compare and contrast all of those options. So this third screen is our options analyzer. This then allows us to select any 3 options that we have, or 2 or more options that we've built, and then have a look at the returns, both in financial and non-financial terms. Have a look at the outlay, have a look at the risk profile of each of the options, and then make a recommendation. So I might decide that refurbishing the existing facilities is my recommended option. I can save that and then produce the business case. And at that point, the business case won't only include my recommended option, but it can include all of the options. So that way we can show that there's been a thorough and considered process that's been undertaken in order to arrive at the recommended option. Once we get approval for that option, Amplify allows us to activate the recommended option. It will automatically archive all the options that didn't end up in our final business case, in our recommended business case. And so we don't lose those things. They're not deleted, they're just archived. So we're now not going to be tracking those benefits and those costs, but they're still there for historical record purposes. Okay, so that's a very brief overview of the Release 9 features. I just want to quickly also mention what's coming. Now, to my mind, the most engaging part of Amplify is the benefit map. And so we've been working on how can we enhance the benefit map. It's a little bit old, it's one of the original features that we developed. And so we've listened to our customers and we've built a whole bunch of new features into the map, including the ability to pan and zoom so we can make bigger maps. We can also identify the owner of individual items directly in the map. So as we're engaging with our business stakeholders and producing the benefit map, we can identify not only what needs to be done, but who will be responsible for its delivery. And then we have a couple of other interesting features which I'll show you now. So here we have a preview of the newer map. It's similar to the old map, but it has a number of new features. The first one is the ability to be able to now pan and zoom. So I can zoom in and zoom out, just like I would in, say, Google Maps. I can also move the entire map around. And so what that means is I can, and also I can actually change the widths of the columns. So I can make one column which might have lots of business change in it. I can make that very wide, have lots of information in there. We also have a facility which we call the trace path facility. So particularly as the maps get bigger and more complex, it can often be difficult to follow the lines as we go from one side to the other. So how do I know what's contributing to a particular objective or an outcome? So this new trace path feature enables me to select any object on the map, and then it will automatically highlight all the contributors to that object and everything that object contributes to as well. And certainly the idea of this map is that it's not just an artifact, it's not just an output, but it's something that we work with our stakeholders to build. And so it's really important that, that the map supports that stakeholder workshop as well as possible. And so that includes the ability to identify ownership and to quickly understand it's actually a team effort. It's a joint responsibility delivering these objectives. And one last feature that I'm going to quickly mention, it's not quite finished, but there's we're regularly asked, wouldn't it be great if we could go from this map directly to an object? So if I'm talking about this particular business outcome, can't I just go to that business outcome rather than having to navigate elsewhere? And so we've added a feature where we can now hold a key and then quickly access its dashboard. So we'll now be able to drill straight into an item. And what that will allow, I can see all those people who have used our map all nodding their heads, it would mean that you can save a whole lot of clicking, particularly while you've got those stakeholders there in the room. It's about capturing as much information as we can in that short 2-3 hour workshop, so that when everyone leaves, we've built as much of the map as possible, and we've built as much of the business case as we can. Okay, so the last thing that I'd like to talk about is the Principal Toolbox, version 8, which came out earlier this year. There's a whole range of new features, and I know I've sent out release notes, and I'm sure that those of you who are using the product would have looked over them eagerly, as I did. But let me just quickly run you through them, because sometimes seeing something on a piece of paper and understanding, well, how does that help my business, can be two different things. So the things that we're going to look at today, firstly, organisational units, integrated program management, portfolio dashboards, resource management, Gantt chart improvements, and then lastly, mobile timesheets. So let's just look at those one at a time. Organisational units. Principal Toolbox has always had an enterprise project structure, but it was really missing a way of being able to say, okay, actually different parts of my business are at different levels of maturity and have different requirements. So what if in one part of my business I want to do resource planning, but in another part of my business I don't? Or what if I want to have different portfolio management capabilities in different parts of my business? We had one capability for portfolio management and a separate one for project management, and the two didn't really mesh. What we now have is the ability to have an organisational hierarchy, and then within each of those hierarchies we can define where we're going to manage, for example, our portfolios of work, where we're going to do our resource management and projects and programs. And of course, based on our project models, where are we going to do agile, where are we going to be following MSP, and so on and so forth. So that's a new feature that comes along with version 8, and everyone gets, by default, a single organisational unit, which represents your organisation. But then you now have a capacity to be able to extend it. Okay, now what I'd like to do is I'll show you how that works. So here in the Principal Toolbox, I now have this very simple menu. We used to have all these tabs at the top of the screen, very hard to navigate around. Now we have simply go to, and then we have our enterprise structure. We navigate to where we want to go with our enterprise structure, and then once we get there, we can see all of the features that have been enabled for that part of the organisation. So here we have just a resource management feature. So now for Perth, here is where the Perth Resource Manager goes and does all of their resource planning. What if we want to go and see all the projects that are being undertaken in our New Zealand operation? Well, I go to New Zealand, and then I can see that New Zealand's actually doing project management. They've got portfolio management turned on as well. So they have their own set of portfolios, and they can be managing them however they like. Maybe they're doing their prioritisation with a custom field just for the New Zealand executive team, but it's a separate process to the Australian executive team. So that's the organisational units feature, and I was told by Arga last night one of the best features of that is that now at the enterprise level we can actually report on everything in the one place. Before, if we wanted to report on portfolio information at the enterprise level, we went to the portfolio view. If we wanted to report on projects, we go to the project view. Now it's all in the one location. Second feature, integrated program management. Principal Toolbox has long had support for managing successful programs as a concept, but in terms of how did that work in terms of planning, the planning wasn't all that integrated. So we were able to do the process, but when we got to planning, it was a little bit cumbersome. Let me show you how the planning now works. For those of you who are still using the old project model, you'll notice that here is the new Gantt chart that the Principal Toolbox supports. And this Gantt chart has since version 6, when it was first released, has really come on in leaps and bounds in terms of functionality that's been built in. What we're looking at here is a program level Gantt chart. So we can see here we have the state freeway overhaul program, and then we have our process that we're following to identify and define the program, to produce our blueprints and mandates. Then we get into the tranches, and at that point we might decide, well actually there's a series of deliverables we want. We're going to chunk those up into projects. Now when I identify those chunks, I can actually say, well that's actually a project. Now that project will now appear in my list of projects, and I can then start them when I need to. So it may be a waiting project, it may be a current project. When I say, all right, that project is now ready to be planned, I open that project dashboard, and I might be managing that project using a Prince2 approach. But what happens is, in the plan, I not only get the standard project model, but I also get all of the deliverables that I have to report on back to my program. So the program manager is looking at a single integrated program Gantt chart, and the deliverables that they've identified, you'll see they're locked, because they're now being managed at the project level. And the project manager, they're locked as well, because they can't delete them, they've been set by the program manager. So now, what the PM can do is take those deliverables, place them anywhere they like in their program plan, in their project plan. They can add dependencies, and when they schedule, those dates not only update in their project, but they also update in the program. So now we have true integrated program management. We also have a capacity for those programs to be included as in a portfolio. At the moment, portfolios are of projects. And so for some of our customers, in order to get around that, we have special program type projects. So we can have programs in portfolios, but now in version 8, we can actually have programs and projects together in a single portfolio. So we can do a common reporting cycle across, irrespective of whether they're projects or they're programs or a combination of both. We've also extended the portfolio management capabilities of Principal Toolbox. There's a range of new dashboard components As seen here, I have a single view here of a portfolio of work, including a number of different charts and graphs. And we also have some capacity within our portfolio to do scenario planning. So what we can do is we can now make selections of projects, and as we can move things into and out of my current portfolio, and as we do in real time, we see the dashboards update. So what this allows us to do is quickly understand, if we take these projects out, what effect does that have on our budget and our resource utilisation? If we put these projects in, what effect will that have? When we're ready, we can then apply that scenario to the portfolio, and just like in Amplify, at that point, everything that is in the active portfolio is now active and reported against. Everything that's inactive is now archived. Resource management. There's long been a capability for resource management in Principal Toolbox, but there was not a single view to allow us to analyse that information. There were lots of numbers, lots of tables, but there was rarely a decent view to report. And so we would end up with Excel spreadsheets, where we take all the numbers out and then produce these good-looking dashboards, but it was in Excel. So what Principal Toolbox has added is this resource utilisation widget. It's a very useful widget in that it allows us to look ahead across various horizons, all the way from a month, all the way out to 12 months, so short-term versus long-term planning. And we can then look for a selection of projects, or we can look at all of our projects in a portfolio to see where we have resource capacity and demand constraints. So in this case, we can see that we have more resources being requested than we have available coming up in the next 2 weeks. And then it's okay, then it goes down, and then we have actually excess resources. So we might be saying, okay, well, we're pretty full for the next 2 months. But from 2 months on, we can actually start to take on some more projects. So Peter might be able to get some of his 246 projects underway because resources have now become available. Which resources? Well, I can hover over and actually see which specific resources are those that are being the most requested and the least requested. So I can understand where is that these bottlenecks coming from. So I can understand which individuals are having the problem. Okay, Gantt chart. I mentioned the Gantt chart's been significantly improved. Now, we know that most of our customers still do detailed planning in Microsoft Project, but the forces have been working very hard to see if they can help customers, particularly from a financial perspective. Why pay for project licenses if we don't need to? So they have invested very heavily in the Gantt chart by not only including our standard Gantt chart features that you'd expect in terms of scheduling, dependency management and the like, but also incorporating resource and cost management into the Gantt chart functionality. So you'll now see that on the planning tab, I have 3 views. I've got the Gantt chart view, I've also got the cost view and the resource view. Now I'm currently looking at the resource view here, and what this allows me to see is in one screen both the Gantt chart and my resource summary for the project. What are my total requirements? What are my actuals to date? And what have I been allocated from the organisational resource pool? Okay, so these are some. So obviously we're talking here about one single system where we can look at resources that are being utilised across in a matrix-style organisation. What have I actually been given to work on for my project? Do I have enough resource allocated? And so there's a number of usability features, such as the ability to quickly go to full screen, to be able to select any individual item, have a look at its resource requirements, and the like. And just for Graham, there is a new feature, which is the ability to not only produce an image of the Gantt chart for printing or for including in reports, but you can now also produce it as a PDF.
But can you customise the way it gets generated?
Oh, there are...
Because generating a PDF or a JPEG doesn't really matter. It's the same concept.
That's right.
It's an image.
Well, there are a whole range of customisation features. I'll run you through those, Brad. Okay, so there's that's just a very brief overview of the features available in the Principal Toolbox. And just before we finish, one last thing I wanted to mention. Have a quick show of hands. Who came along to Project Chat in March this year? About a third, okay? All right, so I think, from my perspective, the event went very well. We had our biggest turnout ever. We had 170 people over the 2 days and 2 nights. It's a lot of effort to organise the event. So we've already had some people saying to us, okay, well, when is Project Chat 2016? And I was thinking, how am I going to get around this? No, I think we have to do it. So let's go ahead and make the announcement. We've actually been approached by the AIPM, the Australian Institute of Project Management. They're running their annual conference next year in Sydney, as do we. And Yvonne Butler, who's the CEO, she was one of our closing keynote speakers, for those who were there would remember. So Yvonne has suggested, well, they're actually running the International Project Management Association Regional Conference next year, is being hosted here in Sydney. So it's a big regional event, not just a national event. And I think one of the areas that the AIPM would like to expand is their benefits management and value management streams within the AIPM. So we've been asked to look at joining the conferences together under a banner. So the one banner would be the AIPM conference. Their dates that they've just announced at their last conference is the 16th to the 19th of October here in Sydney. So the Project Chat conference will be within that region. We don't know exactly what the dates for our conference will be yet, but what we do know is that we will have some fantastic speakers. For those who remember our opening keynote, Steve Jenner, who said to everyone, put your hands in the air, and now a little higher. And everyone put their hands up a little higher, and he said, see, I knew you had more to give. Everyone has more to give. And then we had one of our closing keynotes was Chris Deeble, Air Vice Marshal Deeble, who's looking after the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program, who said that if he got to write the business case for that program, he wouldn't be needed to come in and fix the projects that are in trouble. Now, he was saying the work needs to be done up front, which I thought was a great way to finish the conference. And yeah, there's all the banditos from our Mexican-themed dinner as well. So we all had not only a great learning experience, but well, at least from what I can remember, we all had a great fun time as well. And for those who were there, I can see you smiling. So just put that in the diary, and more information will come very soon. Okay, thank you all for your attendance this morning, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you all very soon. I'll be here, and so will be Peter if you've got any questions.